They say pride comes before the fall, but nobody expected the fall to be this spectacular. When Queen Zixara of the Dominion Empire first laid eyes on humanity's ramshackle fleet of converted cargo ships and mining vessels, she laughed so hard that her crystalline exoskeleton cracked. The sound echoed through her throne room like breaking glass, a symphony of derision that would soon become the most regretted laugh in galactic history. These creatures, she wheezed between fits of laughter, these soft-skinned mammals think they can negotiate with the Dominion? Look at their pathetic ships. Look at their crude technology. They're barely evolved beyond throwing rocks at each other. What Queen Zixara didn't know was that she was about to meet Commander Sarah Chen, a woman who had spent her entire life being underestimated. And Sarah Chen was about to teach the galaxy's most feared ruler that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one everyone dismisses as harmless. This is the story of how humanity went from being the galaxy's laughingstock to its most respected species in just 5 encounters. This is the story of how one human woman turned the tables on an empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds. And this is the story of why, to this day, no alien species dares to underestimate the ingenuity, determination, and sheer stubborn refusal to quit. The greatest wars aren't won with the biggest guns or the fastest ships. They're won by those who refuse to stay down when everyone expects them to fall. The diplomatic chamber aboard the Dominion flagship Eternal Conquest was designed to intimidate. Crystalline walls rose 30 meters high, their surfaces alive with shifting patterns of light that hypnotized weaker minds into submission. At the chamber's heart sat Queen Zixara on her throne of living metal, her 4 arms draped casually over the armrests as she regarded the pathetic delegation before her. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the head of the human diplomatic team, her simple gray uniform a stark contrast to the ornate ceremonial armor worn by the Dominion guards. Behind her, Ambassador Watanabe clutched his briefcase containing humanity's formal surrender documents. The weight of 6 billion human lives pressed down on Sarah's shoulders, but she kept her expression neutral despite the alien queen's obvious contempt. So Queen Zixara began, her voice a harmony of crystalline chimes that somehow conveyed infinite condescension. The mammals have finally realized their place in the natural order. How refreshing. It saves us the trouble of burning your worlds to ash. Sarah said nothing, studying the alien ruler with calm gray eyes. She had read every intelligence report about Queen Zixara during the 3-month journey to this meeting. The Dominion Queen was ancient by human standards, having ruled for over 2 centuries. She commanded a fleet of 10,000 warships and had personally overseen the conquest of 47 star systems. Her empire stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, and every species within it knew better than to challenge her authority. Every species except humanity, which was why they were here now. The Queen's secondary arms gestured dismissively at the humans. "Look at them," she said to her court, which erupted in the discordant laughter that passed for amusement among the Dominion elite. They arrived in converted cargo vessels. Cargo vessels! As if they were delivering supplies to a trading post rather than surrendering to an empire. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Queen had just made her first mistake. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Watanabe said, his voice trembling slightly, "we come bearing the unconditional surrender of the Human Colonial Alliance. We ask only that you show mercy to our civilian populations." Queen Zixara's laughter grew louder, a sound like breaking glass mixed with wind chimes in a hurricane. "Mercy? You want mercy? Tell me, little mammals. What could you possibly offer the Dominion that would be worth our mercy?" This was Sarah's moment. She stepped forward, ignoring the way the Dominion guards shifted their weapon grips. "We offer you the chance to avoid making the biggest mistake in your empire's history." The laughter died instantly. The court fell silent. Queen Zixara's 4 eyes focused on Sarah with laser intensity, their golden irises narrowing to slits. When she spoke, her voice carried the promise of slow death. "Explain yourself, mammal, before I decide to make an example of your species." Sarah clasped her hands behind her back and looked directly into the Queen's eyes. "You're about to accept our surrender without understanding what you're actually surrendering. You see those cargo ships that brought us here? They're not cargo ships anymore. And we're not here to surrender." The Queen's exoskeleton darkened, a sign of rising anger. "Then why are you here? We're here to give you one chance to withdraw from human space peacefully. Consider it professional courtesy from one military commander to another." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Queen Zixara began to laugh again, harder than before. Several of her courtiers joined in, and soon the chamber rang with alien mirth. The sound went on for nearly a minute before the Queen finally composed herself enough to speak. "Professional courtesy?" she wheezed. "You think you're a military commander? You arrived in 3 cargo ships. 3. I could destroy your entire fleet with a single destroyer, and I have 10,000 ships. Your entire species numbers barely 6 billion souls across 12 worlds. The Dominion rules over 600 billion subjects across 1,000 systems." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Those are impressive numbers, Your Majesty. But you're making the same mistake that every empire in history has made when facing humanity. And what mistake is that? You're assuming that numbers are all that matter in war." Queen Zixara leaned forward on her throne, her golden eyes gleaming with malicious anticipation. "Please enlighten me. What could possibly matter more than overwhelming superiority in ships, weapons, and soldiers?" "Creativity," Sarah said simply. "Adaptability. The willingness to break rules that your enemies consider unbreakable. And most importantly, the refusal to quit even when the odds say you should." The Queen's laughter was sharp now, cutting through the air like shards of broken glass. "Creativity? Against plasma cannons that can crack planets? Adaptability against shield technology that makes your ships invulnerable? Refusal to quit when you're outnumbered 16,000 to 1? Sarah reached into her uniform pocket, causing every guard in the chamber to tense. She pulled out a small device no larger than her thumb and placed it on the negotiating table between them. "This is a human invention called a quantum resonance disruptor. It's quite simple, really. It identifies the specific frequency signature of Dominion shield generators and creates an interference pattern that causes them to collapse." Queen Zixara barely glanced at the device. "Impossible, our shields are quantum encrypted. The mathematical probability of randomly generating the correct interference frequency is 1 in 4.7 billion, Sarah interrupted, "which is why we didn't randomly generate it. We captured one of your scout ships 6 months ago, reverse-engineered your shield technology, and built specific counters for it. The device on the table contains the shutdown codes for every class of Dominion shield currently in service." The Queen's confident smile faltered for the first time. "You captured a Dominion vessel? Impossible. We would have detected any... The crew of the scout ship Silent Hunter might disagree if they were still alive to do so." Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm, conversational even. "They were investigating an asteroid field in the Kepler 442 system. What they didn't know was that we had been tracking their ship for weeks using passive sensors they didn't even know existed. When they stopped to investigate what appeared to be a derelict mining station, they found themselves caught in a gravity well powered by the station's fusion reactor. Queen Zixara's exoskeleton had gone completely black, a clear sign of alarm among her species. The Silent Hunter reported mechanical difficulties and then went silent. You assumed they encountered some natural phenomenon or suffered equipment failure. What actually happened was that 8 human engineers in pressure suits cut through their hull with industrial plasma torches while their shields were down for routine maintenance. The engagement lasted less than 4 minutes. We took the ship intact, along with its complete computer core and shield generators. The Queen was on her feet now, all 4 arms spread wide in a threatening display. Even if this is true, 1 ship's worth of technology cannot defeat an empire. Sarah smiled for the second time since entering the chamber. "You're absolutely right. 1 ship's worth of technology can't defeat an empire. But it can teach you how an empire works, and once you understand how something works, you can figure out how to break it. She gestured to the device on the table. That little gadget doesn't just contain shield frequencies. It contains the complete technical specifications for every major Dominion weapons system, the locations of your shipyards and supply depots, the deployment patterns of your fleets, and most importantly, the personal access codes for your flagship's computer system. Queen Zixara stared at the device as if it were a venomous snake. "You're bluffing." "Computer," Sarah said clearly, "initiate Emergency Lockdown Protocol 77 Alpha." The lights in the chamber immediately dimmed to emergency power. Blast shutters slammed closed over the viewports with metallic thuds that echoed through the suddenly quiet space. Warning klaxons began to wail throughout the ship, and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly before stabilizing at half-normal strength. Queen Zixara's guards rushed toward Sarah, but she held up one hand. "I wouldn't if I were you. Right now, your ship's computer thinks it's under imminent attack by Dominion rebels. The security systems are armed and will fire on anyone carrying Dominion military equipment. That includes all of you." To prove her point, targeting lasers from hidden defense turrets painted red dots across the guards' armor. The warriors froze, recognizing the pre-firing sequence of their own automated defenses. "You see?" Sarah continued conversationally. "Humans have a particular talent for finding weaknesses in systems that their creators thought were perfect. Your computer security, for example, was designed to prevent unauthorized access by anyone who didn't know the proper codes. What it wasn't designed for was someone who had legitimate access codes but used them in ways you never imagined." Queen Zixara's voice was barely a whisper. "How did you get my personal access codes?" "The same way we got everything else. Your scout ship's computer had cached copies of recent communications with Fleet Command, including your standing orders for patrol routes and emergency protocols. Those orders were authenticated with your personal command codes. It wasn't hard to extrapolate from there." The Queen sank back onto her throne, her exoskeleton cycling through colors of confusion and rage. "What do you want?" Sarah picked up the device from the table and slipped it back into her pocket. "Computer, cancel emergency lockdown. Authorization Chen Alpha 77. The lights returned to full brightness, the blast shutters retracted, and the klaxons fell silent. The targeting lasers disappeared, and the guards slowly lowered their weapons while shooting uncertain glances at their queen. "As I said when I first came aboard," Sarah said, "we want to give you the chance to withdraw from human space peacefully. You have 48 hours to remove all Dominion forces from the 12 systems currently occupied by humanity. If you agree to this, we will return your scout ship's computer core and promise never to use the information it contained against you again." Queen Zixara's eyes blazed with fury, and if I refuse, Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then you'll discover what happens when humans stop playing by the rules. We didn't bring 3 cargo ships to your flagship, Your Majesty. We brought 3 weapons platforms disguised as cargo ships. Each one is carrying enough weaponized antimatter to crack a moon, and they're all linked to Deadman switches that trigger if my vital signs stop registering." The Queen stared at her in disbelief. "You would destroy yourself just to take revenge? Ma'am, I'm a human military officer. Destroying myself to complete the mission is literally part of the job description. But more than that, I'm betting that you're too smart to let this escalate to mutual destruction when you could just withdraw and find some other species to conquer. The galaxy is a big place, and there are plenty of civilizations out there that won't fight back as creatively as we do." Queen Zixara was silent for a long moment, her forearms drumming against her throne as she calculated odds and options. Finally, she spoke. 48 hours. 48 hours, Sarah confirmed. We'll be waiting at the edge of your sensor range. If we detect any Dominion ships still in human space after the deadline, we'll assume you've chosen the hard way." As the human delegation prepared to leave, Queen Zixara called out to Sarah, "Human, what makes you think this ends here? Even if I withdraw now, the Dominion has a long memory. We do not forgive, and we do not forget." Sarah paused at the chamber's entrance and looked back over her shoulder. "Your Majesty, You're making the same mistake that brought you here in the first place. You're assuming that this is about forgiveness or memory or pride. This isn't personal. This is just business. Business, the business of survival. You tried to take something that belongs to us. We're stopping you. Nothing more, nothing less. But if you want to make it personal, if you want to turn this into a war of vengeance instead of a simple territorial dispute, then you should know one more thing about humans. What's that? Sarah's smile was cold as the void between stars. We're really, really good at holding grudges. Queen Zixara stood at the observation deck of her flagship, watching the 3 human ships disappear into hyperspace. Her reflection in the crystalline viewport showed an alien face twisted with rage and humiliation. For the first time in 2 centuries of rule, someone had walked into her throne room, threatened her entire empire, and walked out alive. The taste of that defeat was bitter as poison on her forked tongue. "My queen!" General Thaxrome approached cautiously, his own exoskeleton a nervous shade of pale blue. The general was one of her oldest advisors, having served the Dominion for nearly as long as she had ruled it. "What are your orders regarding the human ultimatum?" Zixara's forehands clenched into fists. "Orders? You want to know my orders?" She spun around, her golden eyes blazing. "My orders are to crush these insignificant mammals into dust. My orders are to burn their worlds until nothing remains but radioactive ash. My orders are to make their species extinct before the next moon cycle." General Thaxrome's exoskeleton darkened with concern. "My queen, perhaps we should consider their demonstration aboard this ship. If they truly have access to our systems, they have access to nothing." Zixara's voice rose to a shriek that made the viewport vibrate. "One ship. One pathetic little scout ship. Do you think the entire Dominion Empire can be brought low by the computer codes from a single vessel?" The general shifted uncomfortably. "The tactical analysis suggests they may have more capabilities than we initially." "The tactical analysis is wrong," Zixara struck the viewport with one fist, leaving a web of cracks across the crystalline surface. "These humans played a clever trick, I'll grant them that. They showed some creativity in their deception, but creativity without power is just entertainment. And I am not entertained." She activated her personal communicator with a gesture. "Admiral Kithara, report to the observation deck immediately." Within moments, the Dominion's supreme military commander materialized in a shimmering column of transported energy. Admiral Kithara was a veteran of 47 conquest campaigns, her ceremonial armor adorned with the surrender seals of dozens of defeated civilizations. Unlike the nervous general, she showed no fear in her queen's presence. "You summoned me, Your Majesty? I want the humans eliminated, completely. Every world, every station, every ship. I want their entire species to serve as an example of what happens when inferior beings dare to threaten the Dominion." Admiral Kithara nodded slowly. "How do you wish to proceed, my queen?" "A standard orbital bombardment campaign would take approximately 6 months to—" "6 months?" Zixara's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. 6 months to destroy 12 primitive worlds defended by converted cargo ships? Admiral, are you perhaps suffering from the same delusions that have infected my general?" The Admiral's stance stiffened. "My queen, the humans demonstrated unexpected capabilities. Standard doctrine requires us to assess their full military potential before committing to. Standard doctrine is for fighting civilizations that pose an actual threat." Zixara moved closer to the Admiral, her towering form casting a shadow over the military commander. "These creatures have 6 billion individuals across 12 worlds. We have 600 billion subjects across 1,000 systems. They have perhaps 100 ships total. We have 10,000 warships. The mathematics alone make their extinction inevitable." Admiral Kithara remained silent for a moment before speaking carefully. "What of their technological demonstration? The infiltration of our computer systems? What of it?" Zixara waved dismissively. "So they learned how to bypass our security from one captured ship. Do you know how long it takes to change computer access codes across the entire fleet? 4 hours. Do you know how long it takes to modify our shield frequencies? 2 hours. By tomorrow, everything they learned from that scout ship will be useless. General Thaxrom cleared his throat nervously. But my queen, if they could capture one ship without us knowing, what's to stop them from— Nothing is stopping them from trying, Zixara interrupted. But now we know their capabilities. Now we're watching for their tricks. The element of surprise only works once, General. After that, it becomes a liability because your enemy knows what to expect. She turned back to the Admiral. I want 3 battle fleets dispatched to human space immediately. Use overwhelming force to crush any resistance before they can deploy whatever surprises they think they have prepared. No negotiations, no demands for surrender. Simply destroy everything that moves and everything that doesn't. Admiral Cathara hesitated. Your Majesty, perhaps we should test their defenses first with a smaller force.
Test their defenses? Zixara's laughter was like breaking glass. Admiral, did you not hear their human commanders boasting about their creativity and adaptability?
The best way to counter creativity is with brute force. The best way to defeat adaptability is with overwhelming superiority that gives them nothing to adapt to. She gestured toward the viewport where hyperspace lanes stretched into infinity. Send the 17th, 23rd, and 41st battle fleets. 1,500 ships total. Even if these humans have some miraculous new technology, even if their creativity exceeds our wildest imagination, what could possibly stand against 1,500 Dominion warships? The Admiral and General exchanged glances before the Admiral spoke. It shall be done, my queen. How long do you want to give them to prepare? Prepare? Zixara's smile was sharp and cruel. Admiral, you misunderstand. We're not giving them time to prepare. We're going to hit them while they think they have the upper hand. While they're sitting at the edge of our sensor range, congratulating themselves on their cleverness, our fleets will be jumping directly into their home systems. General Thaxrom looked confused. But Your Majesty, the human commander, said they would be watching for our ships. If we withdraw our forces as they demanded, won't that make them suspicious when new fleets arrive? Exactly. Zixara clapped her 4 hands together in delight. We'll withdraw our occupation forces exactly as they requested. Every ship, every patrol, every monitoring station. We'll pull back beyond their sensor range and wait exactly 48 hours. She moved to her tactical display, bringing up a holographic map of human space. But while our visible forces are withdrawing, our attack fleets will be moving into position through secondary hyperspace lanes. The humans will think they've won. They'll think their bluff worked. They'll be celebrating their victory right up until the moment 1,500 Dominion warships drop out of hyperspace in their home systems. Admiral Cathara studied the tactical display with professional interest. A classic misdirection campaign. Withdraw the obvious forces while deploying the real attack through concealed routes. The humans will focus on watching the forces they know about while remaining blind to the actual threat. Precisely, Zixara said. And the beauty of it is that we're technically keeping our word. I agreed to withdraw Dominion forces from human space within 48 hours. I never agreed not to send new forces after the deadline passed. General Thaxrom's exoskeleton had returned to a healthier shade of blue. A masterful strategy, my queen. Use their own demands against them while maintaining the element of surprise. More than that, Zixara moved to another section of the display, highlighting the locations of human colonies. We're going to use their own tactics against them. They want to play games with computer infiltration and deadman switches? Fine. We'll show them what happens when a real military force decides to play dirty. She highlighted several asteroid fields near human colonies. Our scout reports indicate the humans have extensive mining operations in these regions. Mining operations mean industrial explosives, fusion reactors, and massive automated cargo ships, all perfect weapons if used creatively. Admiral Cathara's eyes gleamed with understanding. You want to turn their own infrastructure against them. I want to show them that creativity is a double-edged blade, Zixara said. Yes, they can capture our ships and infiltrate our computers, but we can turn their mining ships into missiles, their power plants into bombs, and their own automated systems into weapons of mass destruction. Let's see how their adaptability handles 1,500 warships and their own industrial infrastructure being used against them simultaneously. The Queen moved to the center of the tactical display, her image reflected in the holographic projections of human worlds. But that's just the opening move. Once we've demonstrated that their tricks won't save them, once we've shown them the futility of resistance, then comes the real lesson. My Queen? General Thaxrome asked. We don't just destroy their military forces. We don't just conquer their worlds. We make sure that every alien species in the galaxy learns what happened to the race that dared to threaten the Dominion. Zixara's voice took on a ceremonial cadence, as if she were already composing the historical record. We will broadcast their defeat across every communication channel in known space. We will ensure that their extinction becomes a cautionary tale told by mothers to their children. She deactivated the tactical display and turned back toward the viewport. In 100 years, when some other upstart species thinks about challenging Dominion authority, they won't remember the technical details of how we defeated the humans. They won't care about our tactics or strategies. They'll just remember one simple fact. The species that threatened Queen Zixara ceased to exist. Admiral Kithara saluted with all 4 arms. Your orders will be carried out precisely, my Queen. How long do you wish this campaign to last? Zixara considered the question. Make it quick, but not too quick. I want the humans to have time to realize what's happening. I want them to understand that their cleverness has brought about their own destruction. Give them long enough to try their tricks and fail, long enough to adapt and discover that adaptation is useless, long enough to experience the full weight of their mistake. She paused, watching the stars wheel past as the flagship changed course. But not so long that other species start to think the humans might actually have a chance. No more than 72 hours from the first shot to the last planet burning. General Thaxrome cleared his throat. And the human commander? Sarah Chen? Take her alive if possible, Zixara said without turning around. I want to personally explain to her how poorly her creativity served her species. I want to watch her face when she realizes that all her planning and preparation and clever tricks accomplished nothing except ensuring that her people died in a more elaborate fashion than they would have with simple surrender. The Admiral and General exchanged one final glance before departing to carry out their orders. Alone on the observation deck, Queen Zixara stared out at the infinite darkness between stars and smiled. In 46 hours, the humans would learn that some mistakes were unforgivable. In 46 hours, the galaxy would remember why the Dominion Empire had ruled for over 3 centuries. And in 46 hours, Sarah Chen would discover that creativity without overwhelming power was just elaborate suicide. The Queen's reflection in the cracked viewport showed teeth sharp as broken crystal. Soon, very soon, she would have her revenge. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the war room aboard the human battleship Defiance, watching tactical displays that showed the approaching Dominion fleets. Around her, the finest military minds of humanity worked with focused intensity, their faces illuminated by the glow of holographic projection showing ship movements, weapon trajectories, and defensive positions. Admiral, called out Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station, we're detecting massive hyperspace distortions in Grid 77. Looks like the Dominion is bringing friends to the party. Admiral Harrison Foster, the grizzled veteran who commanded humanity's entire space force, moved to Sarah's side. His weathered face showed no surprise at the sensor readings. How many ships are we looking at? Preliminary count suggests 1,500 vessels across 3 separate battle fleets, Torres reported. They're using secondary hyperspace lanes to mask their approach vectors. Very sophisticated deployment pattern. Sarah nodded slowly, her gray eyes reflecting the tactical displays. Right on schedule. Admiral Foster glanced at her with raised eyebrows. On schedule, Queen Zixara is doing exactly what we expected her to do, Sarah explained, highlighting several sectors on the main display. She's too proud to accept defeat, too arrogant to believe humans could possibly threaten her empire. and too conventional in her thinking to suspect we might have prepared for this exact scenario. Colonel Martinez, the head of human intelligence, looked up from his workstation. "Ma'am, I'm showing massive troop buildups in all three fleets. They're not just planning to defeat us. They're planning to occupy our worlds." "Course they are," Sarah said calmly. "Zixara wants to make an example of humanity. She wants every species in the galaxy to know what happens when you embarrass the Dominion Queen. Which means she needs to conquer us completely, not just destroy our fleets." Admiral Foster studied the deployment patterns of the approaching forces. "Sarah, I know you've been working on contingency plans, but 1,500 ships? Our entire fleet is maybe 80 vessels, and half of those are converted civilian craft." Sarah moved to the central command console and activated a secure communication channel. "Dr. Yamato, this is Chen. Are the packages ready for delivery?" The voice that responded belonged to humanity's chief weapons designer, a woman whose brilliant mind had been focused on the problem of fighting enemies with superior technology for the past 18 months. "Awaiting your authorization for activation." "Dr. Yamato," Admiral Foster interjected. "What packages? What authorization?" Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. "Admiral, do you remember what I told Queen Zixara about humanity's greatest strength? Creativity, adaptability, and the refusal to quit. The Dominion has been conquering species for 3 centuries using the same basic strategy. Overwhelm them with superior numbers and technology until resistance becomes impossible. It's worked for them because every species they've encountered has tried to fight them using conventional warfare." She gestured to the tactical display. "But humans don't do conventional warfare. We do whatever works. And what works against an enemy with superior ships and weapons is making sure the battle isn't decided by ships and weapons." Dr. Yamamoto's voice crackled through the speakers. "Commander, I should mention that the quantum resonance disruptors are performing better than expected. We're reading complete shield failures across 60% of the approaching Dominion vessels." Admiral Foster stared at Sarah in amazement. "You didn't just capture the technology from one ship. You've been planning this for months. Actually, Admiral, we've been planning this for almost 2 years." Sarah brought up a new display showing human space from a strategic perspective. "Ever since our first contact with Dominion scouts, we knew this confrontation was inevitable. Zixara rules an empire based on expansion and conquest. Peaceful coexistence was never an option." Colonel Martinez was studying his intelligence reports with growing excitement. "Ma'am, I'm seeing something strange in the Dominion fleet formations. Their ships are maintaining standard spacing as if their shields were still functional, but according to these readings, most of them are completely defenseless." "That's because they don't know their shields are down," Sarah explained. "The quantum resonance disruptors don't create a visible effect. The shield generators show normal readings while actually producing nothing. The Dominion crews think they're protected when they're actually flying naked through space," Lieutenant Torres called out from the sensor station. "Commander, the first wave is dropping out of hyperspace in the Sol system. Estimated time to Earth orbital defenses, 47 minutes. Sarah activated another communication channel. "Captain Williams, are the mining platforms ready?" "Ready and eager, Commander," came the reply from the captain of the converted mining ship New Pittsburgh. "My crew has been looking forward to showing these aliens what human mining equipment can do when it's properly motivated." Admiral Foster looked confused. "Mining equipment?" Sarah pointed to a display showing the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. "Admiral, what do you think happens when you take an automated mining platform designed to crack asteroids and point it at enemy warships instead?" The Admiral's eyes widened with understanding. "You're using industrial mining lasers as anti-ship weapons." "Not just mining lasers," Sarah said. "The beauty of human industrial technology is that it's built to handle the most hostile environments in the galaxy. Our mining equipment operates in hard vacuum, extreme temperatures, and intense radiation. It's designed to cut through solid rock for months at a time without maintenance." Dr. Yamamoto's voice came through the speakers again. "Commander, all mining platforms report successful target locks. The Dominion ships are flying straight into our kill zones without taking any evasive action." Because they think they're invulnerable, Colonel Martinez said with growing appreciation. They're confident their shields can handle anything we throw at them. Sarah nodded. Exactly. Queen Zixara made the mistake of assuming that because we appeared weak during our first encounter, we actually are weak. She never considered the possibility that our apparent weakness was carefully calculated bait, the main display updated to show the Dominion fleet spreading out as they entered the Sol system. The ships moved with the confidence of a force that had never experienced defeat, maintaining formation patterns designed for conquest rather than defense. Commander, Lieutenant Torres reported, enemy fleet is now within range of the outer platforms. They're ignoring all mining installations and proceeding directly toward Earth. Of course they are, Sarah said. They want to capture our homeworld intact so they can use it as a symbol of their victory. Fire when ready, Captain Williams. The next few minutes were chaos distilled into pure light and energy. Across the asteroid belt, mining platforms that had been disguised as routine industrial equipment suddenly pivoted toward the approaching Dominion fleet. Massive industrial lasers designed to slice through asteroids focused their beams on enemy warships that had no idea their shields were offline. The results were devastating. Ships that should have been protected by energy barriers capable of deflecting planet-cracking weapons found themselves cut in half by mining equipment. Proud Dominion cruisers that had conquered dozens of worlds exploded as industrial cutting beams sliced through their hulls as if they were made of paper. My God, Admiral Foster breathed, watching the tactical display show enemy ship after enemy ship winking out of existence. How many platforms do we have out there?
Every mining installation in the Sol system, Sarah replied.
That's 4 737 platforms, all equipped with industrial-grade cutting equipment, all controlled by AI systems that have been programmed to treat Dominion ships as particularly stubborn asteroids. Dr. Yamamoto's excited voice came through the speakers. Commander, the effectiveness is exceeding all projections. The mining platforms are destroying enemy vessels faster than our computers can track the kills. But Sarah's expression remained focused and serious. Don't celebrate yet, Dr. Yamamoto. This is just the opening move. Queen Zixara didn't become the ruler of a galactic empire by panicking at the first setback. As if to prove her point, the Dominion fleet suddenly changed tactics. Instead of maintaining their confident advance toward Earth, the ships began spreading out and launching fighter craft while broadcasting jamming signals designed to interfere with the mining platform's targeting systems. Smart, Admiral Foster observed. They figured out that their shields are compromised and they're adapting their strategy accordingly. Which brings us to Phase 2, Sarah said, activating another communication channel. Captain Rodriguez, are the cargo haulers in position? Affirmative, Commander, came the reply from the captain of the massive cargo vessel Heavy Lifter. All automated freight ships have been loaded with packages as specified, awaiting your word to begin delivery runs. Admiral, what's the cargo capacity of our largest freight haulers? The big ones can carry about 50,000 tons of processed materials. And what happens if you load 50,000 tons of refined uranium into a cargo ship and ram it into an enemy vessel at full acceleration? Admiral Foster's face went pale. Sarah, you're talking about turning civilian cargo ships into guided missiles. The crews are all volunteers, and they're not planning to ride the missiles all the way to impact, Sarah interrupted. Each cargo hauler has been modified with emergency escape pods. The crews will bail out at the last possible moment while the automated systems complete the ramming runs. The tactical display updated to show dozens of cargo ships accelerating toward the Dominion fleet from multiple directions. Unlike the mining platforms, which had been hidden among routine industrial installations, the cargo ships were making no attempt at stealth. They approached openly, broadcasting standard freight identification codes and following normal shipping lanes. The Dominion commanders don't know what to make of them, Colonel Martinez reported with glee. They're treating the cargo ships as civilian traffic and ordering them to change course. Sarah's smile was cold as space. I doubt Queen Zixara's forces have much experience with suicidal freight haulers. Their tactical computers probably don't have any protocols for dealing with weaponized logistics, Lieutenant Torres called out urgently. Commander, the Dominion fleet is launching interceptor craft to stop the cargo ships. They've figured out that this isn't normal shipping traffic. Too late, Sarah said simply. Captain Rodriguez, initiate delivery sequence. What followed was the most unconventional naval battle in galactic history. Massive cargo ships loaded with radioactive materials and high explosives slammed into Dominion warships while the alien crews scrambled to understand why civilian freight haulers were committing suicide attacks. The impacts were visible from Earth's surface as brief new stars flared in the darkness. Incredible, Admiral Foster said, watching the destruction unfold. We're using their own superiority against them. They came here expecting to fight warships, but we're hitting them with mining equipment and cargo haulers. Because Queen Zixara made the same mistake every conventional military makes when facing humans, Sarah explained. She assumed that war is fought exclusively by soldiers using military equipment. She never considered that humans might use civilians, industry, and commerce as weapons of war. Dr. Yamamoto's voice crackled through the speakers, barely containing excitement. Commander, preliminary reports suggest we've destroyed over 400 enemy vessels with minimal losses to our own forces. The Dominion fleet is in complete disarray. But Sarah's expression remained grim. And now comes the hard part. Aboard the Dominion command ship Eternal Conquest, Queen Zixara stared at the tactical displays with growing horror. In the span of 30 minutes, her invasion force had been reduced from 1,500 ships to barely 900. Worse than the numbers was the manner of their destruction. Her proud warships, vessels that had conquered worlds, were being torn apart by mining equipment and cargo haulers. "Report!" she commanded, her voice cracking like breaking crystal. Admiral Kithara stood at her station, her exoskeleton cycling through colors of stress and confusion. "My queen, the humans have somehow compromised our shield systems. Our defensive screens show operational status, but they're providing no protection against enemy fire."
"And their weapons?" Zixara demanded.
"What are they using against us? Industrial mining lasers, my queen, and weaponized cargo vessels loaded with radioactive materials and high explosives."
The Admiral's voice carried disbelief.
"They're not even using military equipment." General Faxrome approached cautiously, his forearms spread in a gesture of confusion. "My queen, this makes no strategic sense. They're sacrificing their entire civilian infrastructure to damage our fleet. No rational military commander would." "These humans are not rational." Zixara struck her command throne with enough force to crack the living metal. "They're fighting like cornered animals," Admiral Kithara finished quietly. "No," Zixara said slowly, a new understanding dawning in her golden eyes. "Like hunters. This entire engagement was planned. They knew we would come. They knew how we would deploy, and they prepared specific counters for our tactics." She activated her personal communication system with a sharp gesture. "All fleet commanders, this is Queen Zixara. Implement Protocol 7 immediately. All vessels are to engage maximum acceleration and close to point-blank range with enemy installations. Our shields may be compromised, but at close range, their industrial weapons won't have time to target effectively." The remaining Dominion ships responded with military precision, their powerful engines pushing them toward the human defensive positions at velocities that would have been impossible for human vessels to match. 900 warships accelerating as one was a magnificent and terrifying sight. "Clever," Admiral Kithara observed. "At close range, our superior maneuverability and weapons will overcome their numerical advantages in fixed installations." Queen Zixara's smile was sharp with renewed confidence. "The humans showed tactical creativity, I'll grant them that. But creativity means nothing when the enemy simply overwhelms your defensive positions with brute force." Aboard the Defiance, Sarah Chen watched the Dominion fleet's charge with calm eyes. Around her, the human command staff monitored incoming reports with professional focus. "They're adapting faster than anticipated," Admiral Foster observed. "Moving to close range negates most of our fixed defensive advantages. And it triggers Phase 3. Sarah replied calmly. "Lieutenant Torres, are you tracking the approach vectors of the enemy fleet?"
Yes, ma'am. All 900 ships are following optimal attack routes toward our primary defensive installations.
Optimal for whom? Colonel Martinez asked. Sarah's smile was predatory. For us, Doctors Yamamoto, initiate the Icarus Protocol. Doctor, Yamamoto's voice came through the speakers with barely contained excitement. Icarus Protocol confirmed. All solar collection satellites are rotating to target configuration. Admiral Foster looked confused. Sarah, what are you talking about? Sarah gestured to a new display showing the space around Earth's sun. Admiral, did you know that humanity's solar collection network generates enough focused energy to power our entire civilization? Of course, but those satellites collect solar radiation for power generation. They're not weapons. They weren't weapons, Sarah corrected. Dr. Yamamoto and her team have spent the last 6 months modifying our solar collection network to focus concentrated solar energy into coherent beams capable of melting asteroids. The tactical display updated to show hundreds of orbital installations around the sun suddenly changing their orientation. What had appeared to be routine power generation equipment was now revealing itself as the largest directed energy weapons array ever constructed. My God, Admiral Foster breathed, you've turned our entire power grid into a solar laser network. Not just a laser network, Dr. Yamamoto's voice clarified through the speakers. A coordinated array capable of focusing the output of a star into precision targeting beams. Each satellite can generate the equivalent of a battleship's main gun, and we have over 6,000 satellites in the network. Queen Zixara was still congratulating herself on her tactical adaptation when the space around her fleet suddenly blazed with focused starlight. Beams of concentrated solar energy, each one carrying the power of a small sun, lanced out from seemingly empty space to strike the charging Dominion ships. "Report!" she screamed as her flagship's hull began to glow with absorbed heat. "Energy weapons, my queen!" Admiral Kithara shouted over the sound of straining hull plates. "Massive directed energy beams from everywhere!" The humans have weaponized their solar collection network. The results were immediate and catastrophic. Dominion ships that had survived mining lasers and cargo ship ramming attacks found themselves caught in a crossfire of stellar-powered energy beams. Hulls designed to withstand the vacuum of space began to melt under the concentrated fury of humanity's star. "Evasive maneuvers!" Zixara commanded, but it was too late. The solar laser network had perfect targeting information on every ship in her fleet, and the beams moved at the speed of light. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "My queen," General Thaxrome called out desperately. "We need to withdraw. The fleet cannot survive this level of concentrated fire." "No!" Zixara's voice rose to a shriek that made the bridge crew flinch. "No retreat, no withdrawal. Order all ships to ram the human homeworld. If we cannot conquer them, we will at least ensure they die with us." But even as she gave the order, Sarah Chen was implementing the final phase of humanity's defense. Aboard the Defiance, she activated a communication channel that connected her to every human ship and installation in the solar system. "All units, this is Commander Chen. The enemy fleet has been reduced to approximately 400 vessels, all showing severe damage from solar laser strikes. They are now attempting a final suicide charge against Earth. Implement the Thermopylae Protocol immediately." Admiral Foster had stopped trying to understand Sarah's seemingly endless supply of contingency plans. "What's the Thermopylae Protocol? The last line of defense," Sarah said simply. "When all else fails, you make the enemy pay such a high price for victory that they wish they had never started the fight." Around Earth, every human ship, station, and installation suddenly changed from defensive postures to offensive ones. Civilian vessels transformed into guided missiles. Space stations jettisoned their populations in escape pods while redirecting all power to weapon systems. Even Earth's moon began moving, its hidden propulsion systems finally revealed as they pushed Luna into an intercept course with the Dominion fleet. "You moved the moon?" Admiral Foster asked in amazement. "We hollowed out roughly 30% of Luna's mass and replaced it with fusion engines and guidance systems," Sarah explained. It's taken us 2 years to complete the conversion without anyone noticing. The moon is now effectively the largest missile in human history. Queen Zixara watched in growing horror as humanity's homeworld revealed the true extent of its defenses. Every asteroid had hidden weapons. Every space station was a fortress. Every civilian installation was a potential weapon. Even their natural satellite had been turned into an instrument of war. How? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her flagship's hull buckling under repeated laser strikes. How did we miss all of this? Admiral Kithara's exoskeleton had gone completely black with despair. My queen, our intelligence reports showed only civilian infrastructure and minimal military installations. There was no indication that the humans had weaponized their entire civilization. Because they wanted us to see only what they chose to show us, Zixara realized with growing clarity. The mining platforms looked like mining platforms because they were mining platforms until they needed to be something else. The cargo ships looked like civilian freight haulers because they were civilian freight haulers until they became missiles. The solar collection network looked like power generation equipment because it was power generation equipment until they turned it into a weapons array. General Faxrome was monitoring damage reports from across the fleet. My queen, we have lost over 200 additional vessels. The remaining ships are all showing critical damage. If we continue this assault, we will lose the entire fleet. Queen Zixara stared at the tactical display showing her once mighty armada being systematically destroyed by an enemy that had turned their entire way of life into an elaborate weapon. For the first time in 2 centuries of rule, she faced the possibility of complete defeat. "Signal all ships," she said finally, her voice hollow with the weight of failure. "General retreat, full withdrawal from human space." "My queen?" Admiral Kithara asked in surprise. "You heard me," Zixara said quietly. "Signal the retreat. We cannot win this battle." But as the surviving Dominion ships began to turn away from their suicidal charge, Sarah Chen's voice echoed across all communication frequencies in a transmission powerful enough to reach every ship in the system. "Queen Zixara, this is Commander Sarah Chen. You came here to make an example of humanity, to show the galaxy what happens when inferior species dare to challenge the Dominion Empire. But you've made a critical error in judgment." The transmission continued as Dominion ships desperately tried to reach minimum safe distance for hyperspace jumps. "You assumed that because we appeared weak, we actually were weak. You assumed that because we used unconventional tactics, we were desperate. You assumed that because we were willing to negotiate, we were afraid." Sarah's voice carried across space with the authority of absolute conviction. "You were wrong about all of it. We negotiated because we hoped to avoid this destruction. We appeared weak because we wanted you to underestimate us. We used unconventional tactics because conventional warfare is for civilizations that think inside the box." The Moon Luna, now revealed as humanity's ultimate weapon, continued its inexorable advance toward the fleeing Dominion ships. Its massive bulk, powered by hidden fusion engines and guided by quantum computers buried in its core, moved with impossible grace for something so large. But most importantly, Sarah's transmission concluded, "You made the mistake of threatening our home, and humans have a very simple rule about threats to our home. We respond with overwhelming prejudice until the threat no longer exists." 3 months after what galactic historians would later call the Battle of Saul, Queen Zixara sat in her private chambers aboard what remained of her flagship. The Eternal Conquest bore scars from humanity's solar laser network, its once pristine hull now patched with emergency repairs that would never fully restore its former glory. Like her empire, the ship was functional but forever changed. Only 47 ships had escaped the Sol system, 47 ships out of 1,500. The mathematics of the defeat were staggering, but the political consequences were even worse. Word of the Dominion's humiliation had spread across the galaxy faster than their fastest messenger ships, carried by trading vessels, diplomatic couriers, and the galaxy's vast network of communications relays. The Queen's reflection in the darkened viewport showed an alien face aged beyond its years. Her exoskeleton, once a brilliant golden hue that spoke of unquestioned authority, had faded to a dull amber that betrayed her diminished status. For 2 centuries, she had been the undisputed ruler of the galaxy's largest empire. Now, she was simply another military commander who had lost a battle. A soft chime announced an incoming message. Zixara activated her personal communicator with one of her 4 hands, expecting another report from her increasingly nervous advisors. Instead, the familiar face of Commander Sarah Chen appeared in holographic projection, her gray eyes as calm and unreadable as they had been during their first encounter. "Your Majesty," Sarah said with a slight nod that might have been respect or might have been mockery. "I hope this message finds you well. What do you want, human?" Zixara's voice carried none of its former authority. The question came out tired, defeated. "I want to talk," Sarah replied simply. Not as enemies, not as conqueror and conquered, but as 2 military professionals who understand the realities of power in a complex galaxy. Zixara almost laughed. "Talk? After what you did to my fleet? After the humiliation you inflicted on the Dominion Empire?" "Your Majesty, with all due respect, the humiliation was self-inflicted. You came to human space with the intention of committing genocide. You brought 1,500 warships to destroy 12 lightly defended worlds. You declared war on a species that had offered you peaceful withdrawal from our territory." Sarah leaned forward slightly in her chair. "We simply responded appropriately to the threat you represented. The only thing we did wrong, from your perspective, was being more effective at warfare than you anticipated." The truth of that statement stung worse than any insult could have. Zixara had expected easy victory over primitive mammals. Instead, she had encountered the most sophisticated defensive strategy in galactic history, implemented by a species that had turned their entire civilization into a weapon. "What do you want?" the Queen repeated. "I want to offer you something that no one has offered the Dominion in over 3 centuries, Sarah said. "A choice." Zixara's golden eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Your empire is collapsing," Sarah said bluntly. 17 star systems have already declared independence since news of your defeat reached them. Your military commanders are questioning orders for the first time in their careers. Your subject species are beginning to remember what freedom tastes like. The Queen's 4 hands clenched into fists, but she said nothing. Every word was true. "You can try to hold the Dominion together through force," Sarah continued. "You can crack down on rebellions, execute dissidents, and rule through fear and brutality. It might work for a few years, maybe even a few decades. But eventually, the Empire will tear itself apart." "Or?" Zixara asked through gritted teeth. "Or you can choose transformation instead of destruction. You can guide the Dominion Empire into becoming something new, something sustainable. Something that doesn't require constant conquest to maintain itself." Sarah activated a holographic display that showed the current political situation across Dominion space. Red indicators marked systems in open rebellion, yellow showed those with significant unrest, and only a handful remained green for stable Dominion control. "The galaxy is changing, Your Majesty. The old model of conquest and subjugation is becoming obsolete. Species are becoming more technologically sophisticated, more capable of effective resistance, more willing to fight for their independence. The Dominion can either evolve or become extinct." Zixara studied the display with the eye of someone who had spent 2 centuries reading political maps. The situation was worse than her advisors had admitted. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A partnership," Sarah said. "Humanity becomes a member species of a reformed Dominion Commonwealth, not as subjects but as equals. We help you transition your empire from a conquest-based system to a federation based on mutual benefit and voluntary membership." The Queen's laughter was bitter. "You want me to give up everything that makes the Dominion powerful. You want me to abandon conquest, abandon expansion, abandon the very principles that built our empire." "I want you to abandon the principles that are about to destroy your empire," Sarah corrected. "Your Majesty, you're an intelligent ruler." You understand that power structures must adapt to survive. The question is whether you want to guide that adaptation or be destroyed by it. Zixara stood and moved to the viewport, staring out at the stars that had once represented unlimited expansion opportunities. Now they seemed like distant lights marking the boundaries of a shrinking domain. And if I refuse, if I choose to fight to maintain the Dominion as it has always been, then you'll face more battles like the one in Sol's system, Sarah said quietly. Humanity isn't the only species developing creative approaches to warfare. The technology we use to defeat your fleet isn't exclusive to us. Within 10 years, dozens of species will have similar capabilities. She activated another display showing technological progression curves across multiple civilizations. The era when superior numbers and conventional tactics could guarantee victory is ending, Your Majesty. The future belongs to adaptive, innovative species working in cooperation. The Dominion can be part of that future, or it can be a cautionary tale about empires that refuse to change. Queen Zixara was silent for nearly a minute, her forearms folded across her chest as she considered options that all seemed to lead away from the absolute power she had wielded for so long. What would this Commonwealth look like, she asked finally. Democratic representation based on population and contribution rather than military conquest. Economic integration that benefits all member species rather than just the dominant one. Military cooperation for mutual defense rather than aggressive expansion. Cultural exchange that preserves diversity while building common understanding. Sarah leaned back in her chair. Essentially, Your Majesty, it would look like what the Dominion Empire could have been if it had been built on cooperation instead of conquest. The Queen turned back toward the holographic projection. And my role in this Commonwealth? That would be up to you and the member species to determine through democratic process, Sarah replied. But I suspect a leader with your experience and capabilities would find meaningful work in such a system, even if the work looks different than what you've done before. Zixara laughed again, but this time the sound carried more humor than bitterness. You're asking me to vote myself out of absolute power. I'm asking you to trade absolute power over a shrinking empire for significant influence in a growing alliance. The Commonwealth model has room for former queens, Your Majesty. It just requires them to convince people rather than command them. The communication fell silent as both leaders considered the magnitude of what they were discussing. The transformation Sarah proposed would be unprecedented in galactic history. No empire had ever voluntarily dissolved itself into a democratic federation. No absolute ruler had ever chosen to become an elected leader. How long do I have to decide? Zixara asked. Take as much time as you need, Sarah replied, but understand that the galaxy isn't waiting for your decision. Other species are already forming their own alliances and federations. If the Dominion doesn't adapt quickly, it risks being left behind entirely. Queen Zixara nodded slowly. I will consider your proposal, Commander Chen. That's all any of us can do, Your Majesty. Consider our options and choose the path that leads to the best possible future for everyone involved. The communication ended, leaving Zixara alone with her thoughts and the weight of a decision that would reshape the galaxy. Outside her viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the political machinations of the species that traveled between them. 6 months later, the Dominion Commonwealth held its first democratic elections. Former Queen Zixara, running on a platform of experienced leadership and peaceful expansion, won the position of Chancellor by a comfortable margin. Her campaign had focused on the practical benefits of cooperation over conquest, backed by detailed economic analyses and testimonials from former subject species who had thrived under the new system. Commander Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen of the Commonwealth Defense Force, attended the inauguration ceremony as an honored guest. As she watched the former absolute ruler of a galactic empire take an oath to uphold democratic principles and serve the common good, she reflected on the strange turns that military conflicts could take. Remarkable, said Admiral Foster, who had accompanied Sarah to the ceremony. A year ago, she was trying to commit genocide against humanity. Now, she's the democratically elected leader of a peaceful federation. People can change, Sarah replied, watching as Chancellor Zixara delivered her inaugural address to representatives from over 300 species. Sometimes they just need the right incentive, and if she hadn't changed, if she had chosen to fight instead of adapt, Sarah's smile was sharp with memory, then we would have given her more incentives until she made the right choice. Humans are very good at providing incentives, Admiral. In her speech, Chancellor Zixara spoke of transformation, cooperation, and the bright future that awaited a galaxy united by common purpose rather than divided by conquest. As she spoke, her exoskeleton had returned to its brilliant golden hue, no longer the symbol of absolute power but of earned authority. The galaxy had indeed learned an important lesson from the confrontation between humanity and the Dominion Empire. But it wasn't the lesson Queen Zixara had originally intended to teach. Instead of learning that resistance to superior force was futile, the galaxy learned that cooperation was more powerful than conquest, that adaptation was stronger than tradition, and that sometimes the greatest victories were won not by defeating your enemies, but by turning them into allies. And in the end, that proved to be the most human lesson of all. The alien queen ridiculed humanity, until a human turned the tables. HFY Sci-Fi.